Welcome to eCommerce Australia podcast.
Ryan, awesome to do this with you. Been listening to your podcast the last few weeks, actually. So when you invited me on the show, I was super excited. Here we are.
Perfect, mate. I knew I seen a listener spike of one, and that must be you. So that's fantastic. But no, appreciate the kind words, mate. Looking forward to, you got some incredible knowledge in 10 years in e-com, in agency life, and dealing with some pretty awesome brands. So I'm really looking forward to getting involved, or to getting into the episode. Can you give us a little bit of an intro, mate? You said you started about 10 years ago. How did that come about, and how's the evolution and how's the journey been for you up until now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just give you the quick kind of, elevated 2-minute story about what kind of propelled me to start the Thoughtful Agency. So back kind of 2004, 2005, I was working in a fashion media company. It was called Oyster Magazine. My role there was to sell advertising space. So I was dealing with, your kind of bigger media agencies and then also independent brands. And I realized pretty quickly I loved working with independent brands. You were really working as, in a partnership type mentality to really get them, brand awareness and hit their kind of brand positioning KPIs. And it was a kind of pivotal moment. Obviously, everyone who worked in print advertising back in, that sort of period knew that print advertising was coming into decline, but it didn't sort of happen overnight. It was always spoken about that digital was going to come, but digital didn't really come and infiltrate the fashion industry and take budget away up until probably 2009-10 when Facebook launched. But it was one pivotal day that I remember. And it was actually when, James Packer and the Murdoch family started selling off their ACP Magazine's business. And I thought, okay, this huge generational wealth created through the Packers, through magazines, if they're getting out of it, I've got to get out of it too. And no one wants to be around a sinking ship, especially if you're in your 20s and you back yourself with some sort of entrepreneurial flair, which I did at the time. So basically kind of wrote out a bit of a business plan where I saw an opportunity to take those fashion businesses that I was working and selling advertising space to. How were they going to, navigate this path of Facebook, Google ads, launching e-commerce, email database? They hadn't even started that yet. So I sort of looked at my lens 5 years down the track and just thought, look, e-commerce is where it's heading. I'll start now and I'll cut my teeth through being a consultant. Did that for 3 or 4 years. Had a client base of about 9 or 10 brands that I was working with, did some exciting things there. And then you start kind of going to 2 or 3 staff members being a consultant. You think, okay, well, I'm kind of going in the path of an agency now. So took a step back, through the help of a, branding agency that I was friends with at the time, a guy called Vince Frost from the Frost Collective. He really made me kind of understand the power of having, a really definitive brand positioning. So it was all about being the performance agency for, digital fashion lifestyle brands. And, we came up with the name, the Thoughtful Agency, and 7 years now of the Thoughtful Agency. So that's kind of the story of being in print media and then coming up with the idea for why we started agency as a pure play for the fashion e-commerce vertical.
Nice.
And Ryan, pretty happy with that decision now because I know you had someone from Shopify on your podcast recently. He mentioned that in Australia, there's about 100,000 Shopify sites. Out of that 100,000 Shopify sites, about 25 to 28% of that, I'm told, is fashion and apparel businesses in Australia. So the total addressable market for agencies like myself and, the Thoughtful Agency and other agencies out there, the fashion apparel industry is quite large in Australia. Once we dig into, the different sectors, looking at women's, denim, multi-brand, footwear.
Yep. And was that just based on your interest levels or who you'd started consulting to get into that fashion and apparel space or lifestyle brands, or was it more strategic in terms of kind of, as you said, that market is quite big here? How did you sort of niche down into those?
Yeah, I think, being the fact that I was, in the industry already selling media to those verticals. So when you go and start a business, right, you look at your, contacts and your mobile phone, who you're close with. And, fortunately, the industry and the people that I was speaking to at the time showed me love, showed me trust, wanted to partner with. And that sort of helped, that openness of those founding clients that I had really gave me that confidence to really feel like, hey, this is an industry And traditionally, a lot of agency owners that I was speaking to at the time, so they sure you want to look at this vertical. It traditionally doesn't pay agencies very well. They undervalue agencies. But I think, if you're trying to go out and sell fashion businesses creative, they don't want to be sold creative. They want to do the photo shoots themselves. They want to do the creative fun parts themselves. But if you're trying to solve a technical problem for them, that's what I found 10 years ago. If you're trying to solve something technical, hard to do, something they haven't conquered before, and you've got the shared learnings to show them the path, then they're all about, the commercial opportunity, really.
Yeah, nice. And you're located in New South Wales. So I did ask before we started recording, where's the better city? I'm a parochial Melburnian, but you're obviously loving the Sydney lifestyle, but also come down to Melbourne for some clients. So what's the attraction of Sydney? Is that where you grew up, and is that kind of what you know?
Sydney's...
versus Melbourne.
Well, I was originally born in Sri Lanka and came to Australia in 1991 with my parents and my brother, who's also my business partner. But Sydney's where we came to and lived here ever since. But what I love about here, it's a great city to live. Beaches, close proximity, great weather. But we're in Melbourne, as I mentioned, every 4 to 6 weeks to meet our clients, such as Kookai, Tony Bianco, and a number of others. So that's an exciting part. I always look forward to my Melbourne trip. So stay on Flinders Lane. So nice and close to all my favorite restaurants. And it definitely feels like a European kind of, 7 working week when I'm there. And I think if you can kind of tag it along to be in Melbourne on a, Friday night and see a game at, the MCG, or be there at the time of tennis, it all becomes kind of exciting, really.
Yeah, exactly. Have you got a footy team or an NRL team? Who do you support?
I'm definitely about, seeing what's happening in the media first and following those kind of cultural trends that are happening, and then kind of, seeing, where my kind of eyes follow after that. I don't have any teams that I follow specifically. Although one of my clients, Farage, are the sponsors of the Swans and the suiting sponsor of the Swans. So,
Okay. Nice. Yeah, well, you follow them, I guess, as a Sydney local as well. But mate, let's get into actually one question. Whilst you spoke about some of the brands that you work with, and that stable is really building for you. What is it about the Thoughtful Agency? And I don't want to turn this into a sponsored, advertorial, but in terms of, I'm just curious as to understand, what is it about the Thoughtful Agency that is starting to attract some of these really good retailers?
Yeah, I think, e-commerce brands in Australia know that they can't just sell to their own backyard. So just selling to Australian consumers isn't going to get you that, significant growth. So we've always been that agency that's based in Australia, works with Australian brands, but has a strong focus on USA growth in particular and rest of the world growth, predominantly USA growth. So once you start doing that for, a couple of brands and following, your proven path of having a Northern Hemisphere specific strategy, which is backed up by, the ability to acquire new customers in global markets, then you become a bit of a value proposition to any brand owner really that's looking to, get through that kind of cluttered agency space and work with brands and specialists in global e-commerce growth for fashion.
Yeah, perfect. Because that is the one thing that I've heard about you guys in particular, is how you help retailers expand into global markets. Did that come about? Was sort of I don't know if I'm saying it right, Ksubi? Was that one of the original kind of brands in your stable that helped you and I guess prove to some others that you could actually execute on the strategy of growing them internationally? Or
yeah, well, I'd say Ksubi is a brand we worked with for 5 years. However, we've actually worked with brands prior to that saw good growth in the US, especially from the women's wear category. So that was the initial kind of stepping stone. Obviously, Australian women's brands have a signature brand DNA and a kind of aesthetic about them that caught the eye of American consumers through Instagram predominantly. So to kind of capture more of that audience, brands need to kind of adopt a performance marketing lens to really get the most of that. So we really cut our teeth on our women's designer brands that kind of drove into that US market in 2017 and 18. And then, Ksubi came on board pretty soon after that, really.
Okay, fantastic. Let's get into some e-commerce insights. No doubt you're a wealth of knowledge in that area. what are you seeing in e-commerce this year from a just an overall trend point of view? We talk a lot about cost per acquisition is probably at an all-time high or close to it, more competitive than ever. SMS is starting to play a major role. Generally, how are you finding your e-commerce clients this year?
Yeah, good question. So I think if we can kind of distill it into, one key area is brands that take a brand first approach towards performance marketing are always going to win, especially through these tough economic times. So, we've gone out there and curated a brand roster that have that ability to invest into brand through their, culture, their content, their commitment towards, I guess, social media content. So basically those social first brands have always done well in e-commerce, but now brands that are constantly investing to telling their brand story and their authenticity and why, consumers should shop their brand, that authentic story really does resonate. So I think, we as consumers, we're always gravitating towards, whether it's, any category, we're always gravitating to a brand that has a holistic story to tell, right? As consumers, we want to buy into those type of brands. So I think it's definitely, to kind of take a step back from the performance marketing lens, it's about brands that take that brand first approach towards their performance marketing, not just selling product. It's about, investing into that full kind of, brand storytelling across all stages of the funnel, really.
Yeah, interesting. And then, so just on that, and in my experience, and I'm sure you've had a lot more meetings with brands that maybe have and have not come on board. How does that play out from a CEO board level when you're having to invest into brand and it's a little bit harder to show ROI initially in the short to medium term? Do you have those sorts of conversations with your clients around performance marketing? Yes, we want to achieve return on investment, but we also need to invest in brand as a long-term strategy play.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess, the go-to for this conversation is to actually show brand owners and CEOs total addressable market in Australia. So let's just say through Meta, I'll look at the female consumer cohort here. Females sort of interested in fashion, 18 to 40. The total addressable market is around about 8 to 10 million, right? But then when you break it down into consumers that are interested in designer fashion products, it's probably about 5 to 6 million. So if you are currently running your, paid social campaigns and you're just doing full funnel conversion campaigns, and you're running, that to say an audience of say 1 to 2 million, how are you trying to kind of hit the rest of the market at that 3 million? It's going to be expensive if you're trying to just do conversion campaigns to that full 5 million audience. So where I'm getting to here is if we've got a brand asset that speaks to the heart of the brand, that you can run video views campaigns, right? Brand awareness campaigns through, that reach objective. That's basically I'm going to go and reach that 5 million really cost effectively. And out of those people that engage with my, video views campaign, then I'll basically bring them closer down into the funnel. So it's always about showing business owners numbers and data, and they get it, right? They're looking at numbers every day, whether it's their own stock turn or whether they're investing into retail store fit outs. They're always looking at numbers. So I think the best way to present brand owners that kind of commitment towards that brand first approach is by telling the numbers story, really.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a fantastic answer, and yeah, really really interesting around that. I agree. It makes a lot of sense. But I guess it depends on the level of clients you work with as well. Sometimes they don't quite see that overall picture. In terms of
and I see it just to kind of, I see it as our responsibility as well, right? As performance marketers and, be engaged by the C-suite of brand owners, not to just, advise them to spend for the short term, but we're looking to grow brands, for long-term growth. So that conversation is a hard conversation to have. And sometimes, brand owners might feel like, oh, well, you're a performance agency. Why are you talking to me about brand? But if you look at, the most successful brands, and Shopify will, explain this, the most successful brands, are the likes of your Culture Kings or your Princess Pollys or, the brands out of the Kardashian stable. And why? Because they've invested into brand. And there's that halo effect that comes down every time they launch a performance channel. They're going to do well on that performance channel because their brand wins, right, over their competitors.
Yeah, that's really great insights, and I couldn't agree more. And I guess so, mate, what's the what's the biggest problem that you're hearing across your clients at the moment? What's the biggest what's keeping your e-commerce clients up at night? What's on their mind?
Look, I think to have a general brushstroke approach towards that question is a tough one. But if I could kind of summarize it in one, I think brands are happy to maintain their current spend as they go from, financial year, into the new financial year rather. They feel like they're kind of happy with what they're spending, but at the same time, they want growth. So, if a brand's coming to us saying, well, I want 20% year-on-year growth, then we come up with some forecasting to suggest that you're going to need to spend more to hit more eyeballs and bring more sessions in. That is challenging conversation because, at this stage, brands are happy to maintain their spend rather than push up and spend more. So I think that's that's the common kind of conversation that's happening at the moment. So we as an agency need to be quite strategic about how we would present options to clients. Are we presenting revenue-based finance options like your Wayflyers or, Shopify themselves have a, opportunity to actually, borrow capital investment into growth, whether it be stock or, ad spend. So it's always about providing solutions to brands rather than saying, okay, well, call us when you're ready to invest more and miss an opportunity to, drive their revenue growth.
Yeah, brilliant. One of the sorry, I just want to go back a sec. That probably leads me into a good segue into kind of strategy and channel specifics. What do you find is the most underutilized strategy at the moment that you're seeing with your clients, or where are you having the best results in terms of from a strategy, whether that be meta ads or TikTok influencers or where are you kind of getting your wins in e-commerce at the minute?
Yeah, well, I think probably the most underutilized strategy at the moment that's definitely driving the results is looking at those customer win-back opportunities for lapsed customers. So, during COVID, you had huge spikes of, new customers shopping with brands, mainly because, brands were on sale, providing reasonable amounts of discounting. Now brands are not. So they're seeing a lot of lapsed customers, whereas that first or second time purchaser that they're looking to kind of generate loyalty from isn't happening. So what do you do when customers fall out the back of your ecosystem? You've got to try and win them back. So we're looking, constantly to present clients about their lapsed customer cohort. And some clients, they've got a couple of 100,000 customers that have shopped from them in the last 18 to 20, sort of 2 years, 18 months to 2 year period, but haven't shopped from them, in the last 6 months. So it's about reactivating them through customer win-backs, through, your personalized campaigns through Klaviyo, automated flows, but then also looking at the match rate on Meta and Google and trying to, hit them with 3 or 4 channels, giving them the same kind of customer win-back offer to bring them back into, that ecosystem. And surprisingly, it tends to be kind of, I guess, more of a project rather than an ad hoc kind of, let's try that for 1 week and see how it goes, because, consumers need to be kind of warmed back up into purchasing a brand again if they've, fallen off the back and stopped purchasing from you.
Yeah, perfect. So is that, to delve into that a little bit further, what sort of messaging is it traditionally a discount, or does it not necessarily be a discount when you're trying to win back clients? When you're trying to win back customers?
Yeah, you've asked a good question there, because historically brands that I guess would attempt to do this themselves internally would just run it for 1 week or 10 days with a code and an offer, which is discounting. We tend to look at the market a bit differently in this position. We look at it like an 8-week window to win that customer back. So you're giving them a richness and personalization of content. You're basically talking to them about, this might be your Europe summer vacation edit. This might be, a customer win back via exclusive access to a sale page that's not available to anyone else. It might be to basically say, shop with us again and receive a 10% off discount code. So you're providing them and kind of grooming them with a lot of different mechanics, some product brand focused and some kind of discount focused. But you really want to kind of mix it up, because I think at the end of the day, brands want to be premium in this approach rather than, being bottom feeders and discount, encouraging kind of, bad behavior per se.
Yeah, exactly. I've had experience working with a sports apparel brand that probably went down that discounting
Yeah.
route a little bit too often, and I feel like it's been a long way back for them to be able to sort of get back to that premium nature. How do you work with clients, and I guess how do we find out more about each customer? Is that sort of part of your strategy? How do brands get to know their customer in more and more detail so they can nail all their creative and they can nail their messaging and they truly understand what each customer wants?
Yeah, I think it's important to be doing brand surveys with your, high value customers, most frequent customers. Definitely doing those sort of surveys to get that rich insights. And then it's also about kind of looking and partnering with people like Meta and finding out what's working in your category. So if you can find out about your customers, find out industry-wide trends and kind of bring it together into kind of an ecosystem, I think it's always a good approach.
Yeah, brilliant. And talk us about a case study. It'd be good to get an understanding of how a brand come on board, what their challenges had, and then what you guys are able to do to help grow them. I know you've got a case study of Ksubi on your website, but is there any kind of really proud one that's come up recently that you're like, yeah, we nailed that, and this was the challenge and this was the solution?
Yeah. Yeah. So really proud of, I guess, the work that we're doing agency wide across our 30 odd brands that are under retainer management with us at Thoughtful. We're a lot of our clients we're working with now in their third or fourth year. So that's an exciting journey. But yeah, you touched on the Ksubi case study. I think that's an interesting one because Ksubi is, I guess, a brand that has a rich history in Australia, around about 20 years of history. And they are absolutely doing a great job in driving their growth in the US. So their CEO, Craig King, and their team have opened up stores in influential, cities like Miami, Chicago, New York, LA. They've really immersed the brand with the hip hop community there and worked with some, influencers in the hip hop space to be quite pervasive in the way they present the brand to market. So that and all kind of, brands that do the initial kind of lead up work through that brand positioning piece, definitely a great brands to work with, and Ksubi is no different to that. We've been working with Ksubi now for 5 years, and their current e-commerce team that's, being headed up through their general manager of online and their digital marketing team are bang on in terms of strategy, and it's just an absolute privilege to kind of work side by side with them. So, working with brands, I think is a journey, right? If you're going to drive growth in 1 year, that's basically quite a flash in the pan moment. But if you're going to turn up with them every year, year on year, I feel like our best work for brands is always, coming up. So I think it's tough sometimes, to write case studies and put it on your website. I tend not to like to do that sometimes because you always feel like your best work's ahead of you. But yeah, Ksubi's definitely an exciting and interesting one. During COVID, they basically, backed the online business to sell through a lot of stock that they, took back off wholesale partners. They stripped their New York and LA store and, started selling that inventory as well. So they really backed the online business, increased spends, quite rapidly to, address that kind of stock issue or stock position that they wanted to trade through. And it's a fantastic business and a fantastic brand to work with.
Yeah, fantastic. I tried some Ksubi on, but I just couldn't pull the look off. It just wasn't quite for me. I wasn't cool enough to wear the brand, but it's obviously a well-known brand. So that's a great case study. Have you seen a shift towards more sustainable, especially in your industry?
Yep.
Obviously, fashion and lifestyle. Sustainability is a huge element, and consumers are now demanding that. Have you seen some of your partners really lean into that sustainability story and that's worked for them?
Look, I think there was definitely, a big movement towards brands doing sustainable capsules and sustainability edits. Definitely pre-COVID. I think COVID's definitely made the supply chain issues just to run, your normal supply chain at full efficiency to deliver product on time. That's been a challenge for a lot of brands. So I think that's set the industry back a few years at least in terms of sustainability route. But I definitely feel that, from a performance marketing angle, I feel as though that channel doesn't really respond too well to the kind of, greenwashing. And if you try too hard to present that through performance marketing, it tends just to miss the mark. You're trying to sell brand, product, sustainable messaging all at once. It's definitely a story that works well on EDMs to your loyal customers, obviously for your website. So it's just about kind of presenting the channel that you're, looking to really delve deep into. And I think video and storytelling really help that. Does that help answer your question, Ryan?
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And it's good to get some insights for someone who was working for some of those sort of top tier enterprise level brands that are expanding. And I totally agree. I think if you're trying to push a message for the sake of trying to get some sales and look how good a job we're doing, then it probably does miss the mark a little bit as well. What's your experience with social media and TikTok and influencers, and how do you kind of how do you navigate that world? Are you still seeing some great results with influencer marketing across some of those platforms? How much involvement do you get when it comes to influencers in that space?
So I would just start by saying that the client roster that we work with, some of the brands that we work with, like Faithful or Shona Joy, Tiger Mist, IMG, those internal teams know how to basically run organic social and influencer better than most agencies around the world. So we're fortunate enough to curate a really good brand mix that are very strong on social. But having said that, there are some clients that find that to be the Achilles heel and their gap. So the common, and I'll just relate back a bit of a story about when we were working with Strand, which is the luggage and travel retailer. They've got 270 stores in Australia. At the time when we were working with them on some social content strategy, I guess the kind of feedback from their senior team was, we're on about 16,000 Instagram followers. It hasn't really grown. How can we grow it? So we set up upon kind of developing a content strategy to basically build their brand pillars, and then engage influencers once the content from the brand was really clear. Then we engaged some high profile influencers to then, run some activations to grow followers. And that, yielded them a follower growth that took them from something like 16,000 to 32,000 in 6 months. So really good follower growth for a brand of that kind of Instagram size. But I think the key thing about that there is, if you're going to do it, you've got to invest deep into the channel to really show that the brand culture and the brand's committed to the channel through your own content. And then when you have the influencers coming, on top to create their awareness, people come to your feed and they see that you're authentic and you're really embracing the channel. They'll follow you. But if you're just basically paying one or two influencers at hefty price for them to tag your brand in, their audience comes to your page and they see that there's not richness of content. It's just not going to resonate. So that's kind of Instagram, a bit of a, I guess, narrative for you there on Instagram. But in terms of TikTok, we've definitely, encourage brands to not just turn on ads on TikTok just for the sake of it. It's definitely about looking at a full funnel approach towards TikTok. So, we're currently building out a TikTok influencer content creator network for our clients. A lot of our clients are time poor, so they don't have the time to invest into the research of who's on brand for us in the US and Oz. So we're just at the beginning kind of stages of presenting that network out to our clients, and it's been really well received. I think it's just about, right time, right place, right? No marketing manager has an extra 5 or 10 hours in their day to go, let me go and research TikTok and find out some influencers. Everyone's on TikTok, but also the algorithm tends to kind of favor, right, if you're into sport and AFL, you'll just be served that sort of content all the time. So to try and find that influencer network takes a bit of work to really start digging into it. But, there are creators out there that want to partner with brands and, are hungry to kind of express their creativity for our industry. So it's an exciting, I guess, time for TikTok and fashion.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'd be interesting a lot of the brands and a lot of the clients that I'm talking to at the moment, they have this premium nature about them and they want to remain premium, but they also want to be on TikTok and Instagram. And what I'm seeing, and I'd be interested in your thoughts in this too, is a lot more of that raw, some people refer to it as ugly, but yes, some of that raw stuff is actually having better cut through than the more polished, curated Photoshop sort of, nice images on Meta. Are you seeing that? Is like, what's your take on the creative side of things when it comes to these?
Yeah, I think campaigns are shot by brands and they're having a shorter window for success. So obviously a brand used to be able to run their campaign and just use that same assets and different images across a 6 day period. Now we're seeing the shelf life for that being probably 4 to 5 weeks maximum if it's a good campaign. And then you need to really, complement and sustain your campaign assets with, always on imagery from influencers, whether it be influencer video or influencer kind of, outfits. That as seen on content is important. It's more about how to wear. It doesn't need to always be that kind of high profile influencer endorsing your brand. It's about different body shapes, different kind of consumers in market, in lifestyle kind of environments, wearing the brand that resonates with Meta campaigns anyway. When we meet Meta, they're always talking to us about co-creator content, right? It's not just entrusting the influencer, it's about that mindset of co-creator. We as a brand want this type of aesthetic and we're entrusting you as a creator to go out and create it for us. But it's, there's quite sort of briefs and, lanes that those content creators need to stick in by brand aesthetics for those brands to get the most out of that content investment.
Yeah, brilliant. Couple more questions, mate, before I let you go.
Awesome.
You mentioned that a lot of the brands you work with, they have, and I'm sure they do with the caliber of client that you have, really strong teams that can execute against organic and TikTok and influencer EDMs. So what is their pain point that they go, geez, we need to give Thoughtful Agency a call? What are they missing that you guys come in and then execute on?
Look, Ryan, I wouldn't say it's one particular channel or one particular thing, but I think what's interesting here is Klaviyo and Shopify make it super easy for brands, right? On the kind of day-to-day use of, the CRM and, e-commerce platform. But at the same time, there's a depth that needs to go into CRM strategy. There's a depth that needs to go into UX, CX, conversion rate optimization. There's a depth of, work that needs to go into enhancing your organic social reach. Likewise, brands sometimes look to internalize their performance marketing team. And I think, any brand can do things on a surface level, but times are tough economically now. Consumers are being quite cautious with that, where they spend their money. They're still spending. They still have the need to buy these, essential fashion items. However, if you want to basically kind of see growth, I think internal teams find that challenge to get really deep into a channel. They're time poor. They're working on a lot of kind of internal kind of, cross kind of functional activities. So it's always challenging for any internal team, I think, to really drive that growth because you just simply don't have the, manpower and skill set. You're not looking at that problem day in, day out, constantly for number of brands to really build that strategic muscle up. So I think there's always that place for agencies now to upskill internal teams. And we're really, taking pride in the way we partner with brands to say, hey, you've got a really strong marketing manager there who's been with you for 3 or 4 years working in the brand content space. But why don't we actually work closely with her to teach her about affiliate and paid and Meta? Because if we've got someone strong on the other side, every idea that we have that's innovative is going to be well received because they're educated and they're ready to deploy with us. So I think that's kind of a key role that agencies and agency owners like ourselves, Ryan, need to play, that our clients and their teams need to be on like a learning journey together that all leads towards, a growth kind of mindset.
Yeah, fantastic. That's such a great way to position it as well because, I guess there's some fear that you come in an agency, you're going to tell them how to do these sorts of things, but it really does come down to truly partnering with brands and being, that partner rather than, taking over essentially. So
yeah, it's got to be fun, right? It's got to be fun for, our teams and their teams and cohesive teams, generally kind of drive great results, right?
Yeah, 100%. And the last one I have, and we'll revisit this in a year or two time, but if you can forecast ahead to 12 and 24 months, what do you see happening? What do you see are going to be the trends in e-com? Is it going to get easier? Is it going to get harder? Is it going to be more brands doing more, more branding than, than kind of conversion marketing? What are your sort of thoughts on the next 12 to 24 months?
Look, I think we all know there's a recession looming and we're kind of somewhere in it. We don't know how deep it's going to go. So I think just depending on some of the, economic kind of considerations, that's going to play a factor. But I think what's going to really be a change in, the way brands approach e-com is more brands going to be, I guess, looking to kind of launch their loyalty programs. I think loyalty's taken a backseat because, e-commerce has seen such a great growth. It's definitely, I guess, a bit of a tech stack thing that needs to be resolved, especially if you've got stores. How do you have that customer data platform to sit in the middle and say, Ryan's shopped in our, CBD Melbourne store, but he's also shopping through online 2 or 3 times a year as well. And how do we unify those two kind of, transactions to tell a loyalty story about you? So, customer data platforms, loyalty platforms, proper CRM teams that understand loyalty. I think that's the way the market will head, especially for those brands looking to kind of, I guess, use performance marketing to drive new customer growth, but then use their CRM through loyalty to drive retention is the key. So I definitely see the industry kind of spending more time to solve that challenge for each other. And, from my ideal kind of lens, I personally see the media planning, media buying side of things for performance be, I guess, from an idealistic sense, spend your money on acquiring new customers and then don't rely on bottom of funnel too much through Meta to bring back your existing customers. Try and get your loyalty really humming to, for that to work for you. So industry wide, we're seeing that for our clients, 2% click-through rate on, EDMs. Open rates are strong, but click-through rates are pretty low.
Yep.
And that's kind of declining year on year now because there's more brands, there's more kind of, consumers signing up to brands for sale and for discounts and all sorts of stuff. So that inbox is getting pretty flooded. And, to make it even more challenging, consumers are looking at their Gmails and things through mobile phones. So the device time on email is kind of, a bit tricky. So I think, loyalty is definitely the way the industry is going to go in the next year or two, which should keep us all on our toes.
Brilliant. That's such a good answer. I love it. And you're right. Devices change, behaviors change. And yeah, we have spent a lot of time on acquisition, and a lot of the guests I've had on talk about retention a lot. But loyalty kind of sits probably underneath retention as well, right? So you got to know, if you don't have a loyalty plan in place, and perhaps something that, our listeners can take away from this podcast today, amongst a lot of other sort of great nuggets there that you've given us. But, if you don't have a loyalty plan, then perhaps over the next 12 to 24 months, that's an area that they need to.
Yeah, we always encourage our clients, like, don't just launch straight into a loyalty program. Do some testing and learning, get deep into your segmentation, work on some personalized campaigns, test things, and then derive your loyalty offer based on what's working for you through your segmented offers to certain audiences, right? Brilliant.
One more question.
Go for it.
I just thought of it.
Yeah, let's do it.
What a surprise. We've got Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Christmas period, Singles Day, all that sort of coming towards the back end of this year. How early do your brands start to talk about that? The results are obviously starting to decline. Everyone's getting a little bit earlier. Yeah. There's a bit of creep going on in terms of trying to get to them first. How do you position your brands for success during that time?
Look, we actually did a webinar leading into last Black Friday with our strategy lead, Emily Savage, and our director of digital strategy, Ian Murphy. And the webinar was all about Black Friday is now about kind of setting your consumers up. From September, October, start building your top of funnel, because consumers are coming to your website not with the intention to purchase in October, but they're looking to archive things, they're looking to screenshot, find their favorite products and styles to shop during November. So it's about kind of really taking a strategic approach to go, we're starting to build our Black Friday strategy September, October through nurturing, building audiences. And then once you drop your sale event, that becomes more like an operational thing, right? Is your creative looking good? Have you got different iterations of it? Is your website optimized? Has it got a good, UX experience? Have you got the best kind of product and brand story during Black Friday to complement? But I think the lead up work is quite key. So, years ago, Black Friday strategy week commenced in the first week of November. What's our offer? What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Are we going to go, to sale at 30% and then 50%, 60% as we decide Monday? Now that needs to be considered at the very beginning of the financial year to have a trading calendar to map out November to say, we're going to do X, Y, Z. And then if we need to bring it all forward because the rest of the market jumps early, then you need to do that. But I think the crazy thing is, if brands go early, the share of wallet just gets spent earlier. So you as a brand, by just holding your shape and going, no, I'm not going to go early, it's almost kind of a bit of a cardinal sin because you just miss out on that share of wallet, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why it's happening offline or, through loyalty, through EDMs, through text messages that...
First access.
It seems that that creep seems to just be coming further and further to almost, October and early November. It's almost, you can kind of just see it starting to, everyone's itching, who's the first to go. It's quite interesting. Mate, thank you for your
time. Pleasure.
One last question. How do you spend a day? What's a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because I think us agency owners, we tend to quite be in our own kind of heads. There's a lot going on across managing teams, implementing campaigns, clients, pitching, all that. So I definitely like to kind of start my week or start my day with some form of exercise. On a Monday, I like to play a good hour of tennis. So I'll play tennis between 7:30 to 8:30, and I find that I'm just not thinking too much about work because tennis is such a tough game to execute on. So yeah, just sort of starting the day without that kind of head noise is really a good place to start. And then it's all about objectives, right? Like I want to connect with my team. I want to find out how performance is going for my, key clients. I want to be involved in obviously contributing towards the strategies that we present to clients as well. A lot of phone calls with CEOs and brand owners and, the C-suite. And then it's, down to kind of, as well, just spending a bit of time just looking at, what's happening around corners and how can we be innovative and strategic through, this period of June, July, when clients are leaning on us to come up with their new financial year roadmaps and growth strategies. So yeah, it's that kind of delicate balance. And sometimes, as an agency owner, you sometimes don't always get it right. And that's okay too. Like you can overcompensate sometimes on, trying to build a really successful full funnel campaign for a new client, and get a bit too deep into that. And then, some other areas can suffer, but yeah, I think sometimes multitasking isn't always a perfect science, right? You're going to lean into certain things that you probably spend too much time on because you're passionate about it. Yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah. 100%. Oh, mate, I start the day pretty much with a run, a ride, or a swim.
Good.
I'm sort of
triathlete,
heavy into the triathlon. Yeah. So, but it's for mental health for me. Like as much as anything, like I need that to keep the mental health in check and just ensure that with you it's tennis, but for me it's running or cycling or swimming in the bay on a Friday with my mates. Whatever that is, I just need to do something. And I feel like I'm at my best when I'm fit and healthy and training hard. It that kind of flows into work life as well. And when I'm not training or resting, I feel like I'm not quite as productive at work.
Sure. I think we've all become in tune with starting the day off well, right? And I think that's important. But one thing that I've been pretty disciplined at in the last few months is actually not being on my emails till too late at night and not being on devices doing work till too late at night, because it definitely makes your ability to fall asleep. Time sometimes goes into the midnight region. You're like, shit, shouldn't have been working till 10 p.m. And then it just ruins your training the next day and you'll flow. So yeah, I think working hard's good, but just shut it off about 8:30, 9 p.m.
Fantastic. Sounds good, mate. I really appreciate your time. It's been...
Yeah, we'll grab a beer in Melbourne. On my next
100%. You built a great agency and a great business. You've got a really good name in the market. You got some fantastic brands. So obviously congratulations on that. Looking forward to following your journey and we'll catch up soon. And we'd love to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, man. And thanks for reaching out and having me on the pod. Great to have, I guess, your contribution towards the e-commerce industry in Australia and profiling people in the industry. So yeah, I'll be listening for the episodes ahead, mate. Well done.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it.